Now, this is somewhat of a niche topic, but regardless, today we're going to be talking about backwards compatible PS3s. And when I mean backwards compatible, I'm not just talking about, the ability to go to PSN and download PS1 games or PS2 games. No, I mean the ability to put an actual disc into said system and actually run it and play it. And I'm only going to be focusing on PS2 compatibility because, regardless of what anyone ever said on the internet or in real life, every PS3, whether it be fat, slim, or super slim, can play PS1 games. Period. Seriously. Any PS3 can play a PS1 game. Done. But PS2 games, sadly, there are only really, two actual models that actually play them. And of course is these two behemoths. There we go. Yeah. This is the CECH A01 and the CECH E01. So yeah, these are two fat PS3s. Not FAT, but PHAT. And for some odd reason, I got my hands on both of them. So what better way to celebrate the fact that I got two of them and just to celebrate just them in general than to just compare them and see which one of these is the better PS2 compatible PS3. Well, to do that, the criteria are storage capacity, hardware, game compatibility, reliability, and video quality. Now, I want to reiterate, this topic is niche, but damn it was it interesting. I mean, just delving deeper into these things and just seeing what the hell makes them tick and how different they are. And to be honest, if you don't want to go down the route, of RGB, upscalers because you don't want to freaking, spend an arm and a leg. But if you do, I recommend watching My Life in Gaming. I mean, I freaking love those guys. I mean, I just want to keep reiterating, that's a great channel. If you want to go down that route, hell yes, watch them. They're on YouTube. But if you just want to get the cheapest yet possibly best quality out of your PS2 games, then you're going to want to get one of these babies. Now the question stands, which one do you get? Well, let's find out. First up, storage capacity. Now, let's just get this quick one out of the way. When the PS3 launched, there were actually two models, the CECH A01 and the CECH B01, not E01, B01. And these two have tons of differences, and that's because the B01 is actually lacking a lot of features. Now, personally, it does look a little sleeker with its black finish around the disc slot, but the B01 does not have any of the memory ports, Wi-Fi, and only has 20 gigabytes, while the A01 has 60 gigabytes. So what about the E01? Well, if you combine the last two, you actually get the E01 size, 80 gigs. So there is a no-brainer here. The E01 definitely wins for having the slight 20 gigabyte edge over the A01, which is honestly great for anyone trying to store more stuff, but in today's day and age, that's somewhat of a minor victory. Now kind of going back to the B01, if you're just looking to use either of these systems as a dedicated PS2 upscaler for your HDTV, a 20 gig would easily suffice. But if you're trying to use this as your main PS3, the more gigs the better. For example, here's my main PS3, and this has 320 gigs. And even that is a bit small for them, as big as a library that I have. I mean, downloadable games and games that need to be installed and stuff, which aren't that many in PS3, but there still are a couple that need to. So yeah. For now, I'm going to give it to the E01, but it definitely just barely clinches it. Now, let's move on to something much more important. The hardware. Now, as I mentioned before, these are identical. I mean, seriously, from the outside, you cannot tell the difference between either of them. But if you were to compare these to any other PS3 model, there's a definite difference. For starters, both of these have 4 USB ports, and this is the easiest, surefire way to tell whether you have a backwards compatible PS3 or just any old fat PS3. So yes, both of these have 4 ports and also come with the openable flap, which reveals all of these expansion memory ports, which, to be honest, are somewhat useless, and it makes a lot of sense that the future models had these, in a sense, welded shut. So yeah, from the outside, these are practically identical, but on the inside, that's where things get far more interesting. So yeah, just saying A01 or E01 is getting a little tired. I mean, I still refer to them as that, but let's go by their street names in this sense. The A01, which is the launch model, is actually known as the full hardware option, whereas the E01 is called partial emulation. What does this mean exactly? Well, let me explain. When the PS3 was first announced, the price point was revealed to be a whopping $600 for the 60 gig model, and $500 for the 20 gig. Now, of course, to us the consumer, that was insane. I mean, the 360 had just released at $399, and the Wii was slated to release around the same time as the PS3 at only $249. But as any tech nerd can tell you, the price made a lot of sense, because Sony actually spent about $800 to make only one of these. I mean, not only was the PS3 on paper the most powerful console of that generation, it contained a brand new video medium, Blu-ray, and most important thing is what this whole video is about is the fact that it came with the Emulation Engine CPU chip and the graphics synthesizer GPU. Now, what are those? Well, they are essentially the PS2 CPU and GPU. That's right, every launch PS3 essentially came with one of these built in. So with that logic, when it came to PS2 games, if a real PlayStation 2 could play it, this PS3 could too. Which is why calling it full of hardware makes sense. So what makes the E01 partial emulation? Well, again, going back to the launch of the PS3, 360 and the Wii were mopping the floor with it. PS3s were selling decently, mind you, but this was mostly due to brand loyalty, which was pretty low at the time, or home consumers looking for a cheap Blu-ray player. Yeah, at $600, this was the cheapest Blu-ray player in the mid-2000s. But regardless, Sony was losing their foothold on the video game market, and losing a lot of money in the process, because every PS3 was being sold at a huge loss. So a year after launch, they made a revision of the console that released in August 2007, the CECH E01. This console maintained all the core features of the A01, including all the lucrative memory ports that no one ever used, but did take out one thing, the Emulation Engine CPU chip. But this did not signify the end of backwards compatibility. No, instead now, PS2 compatibility was handled through software emulation and the graphics synthesizer chip, which makes it partial emulation. So yeah, the big difference between the two is that technically the A01 is a PS2 complete with the Emulation Engine and the graphics synthesizer, while the E01 is just one huge emulator with an original GPU chip. So, if you are a stickler for true backwards compatibility, well, there's a clear winner here, but even regardless of that, the A01 wins for being a technical marvel for not only playing PS2 games, but technically having the guts of a PS2 built into it. So yeah, the CECH A01, the full hardware one, wins here. Alright, with the specs out of the way, let's move on to the actual games themselves. Full-on game compatibility. Now, some of you may be thinking, who the hell cares if it's emulation? I mean, I'm still playing PS2 games on official hardware. And you're right, but the quirk of partial emulation does come with a significant downfall. Now, if you've ever emulated a game in your life, you would know that things don't always run 100%. Well, sadly, the same applies here. However, as I threw games into it, I was amazed to see that the fear and qualms stated all over the internet about owning a partial emulation console were mostly exaggerated. But there is still a list of games that have issues. And yes, these issues vary in level of severity. An example of a minor issue is in Silent Hill 2. For some odd reason, James's leg just disappears when he's in his idle animation. This happens throughout the game. But once you have a weapon equipped or are constantly on the move, you will ultimately forget it even happens. Next, moderate issues manifest themselves in games that begin to mess with how you progress through a game, such as freezing in certain areas, making the player avoid these areas, or just freezing and then just coming back. These are an annoyance, but at the same time, they're not game-breaking. But of course, that brings me to the worst issues, which are game-breaking. And well, these make the game outright unplayable. To something as horrible as the frame rate in Tekken Tag Tournament, or in some cases just outright freezing in an unskippable cutscene. Now, it's nearly impossible for me to check every game myself, but for what I have, most of the games in my collection either play perfectly fine, or with some of the minor issues. And thankfully, that appears to be the norm across all PS2 games. According to many compatibility lists and hearsay on the internet, about 90% of the PS2 software library run pretty much perfectly. So yeah, I mean, a 90%, that's an A- in my eyes, and that's great. But we are comparing the two consoles here, and the E01 has about 90% compatibility rate. What about the A01? Well, I have read that there are some compatibility discrepancies, which by the way, I will be putting the links to these lists in the description. And just a note, these also include some PS1 games. And weirdly enough, some PS1 games are actually reported not to be able to play on the full hardware, but yes on the partial emulation. But yeah, regardless of that, let's get real. Out of the games that I tested, and the ones that I actually saw on the list, I mean, comparison rate essentially is 90% versus something like 99.9%. So yeah, the clear winner here is the A01, no question. So there you have it. The A01 is the definitive superior console here. So you should go out and get one, right? No. Surprisingly, goddammit, no. Now, going back to the 7th generation of consoles, we all remember the Red Ring of Death debacle, where 360s were so jam-packed with hardware that every single one was essentially a ticking time bomb, because they were bound to overheat and fail. And that's not an exaggeration. At least according to Game Informer back in September 2009, Xbox 360s had a failure rate of 54.2%. Yeah, 54.2%. A little more than half of all 360 consoles were duds. And sadly, I was also included in this statistic. But yeah, regardless, where am I going with this? The problem with launch consoles, and yes, that's the main issue with this PS3, is the fact that it's a launch console. Sadly, every launch system has issues, whether it be as far back as the NES Red Light of Death, or something as recent as the PS4 which is overheating and dying. It's safe to say that launch consoles are extremely finicky. The PS3 also fell victim to this, nowhere near as bad as the 360, but yeah, at about 10% of launch PS3s suffered from something called the Yellow Light of Death, and that was back in 2009. That number has surely gone up in recent years. And sadly, the Yellow Light of Death is an issue that can affect any PS3, but the biggest contributors to this tally are easily the original launch PS3s. By the time the E01 had released, the manufacturers weren't pressed to make as many as they could, and new hardware designs made the console a much more reliable system that not only contained newer components, but also a CPU and a GPU that created less heat than a launch model. Case in point, regardless of what it seems like, this thing has been giving me nothing but issues this whole video. I mean, whether it was freezing on the main menu, or it wasn't reading discs, even though the other one was reading discs completely fine, the controller desyncing, this thing is slowly but surely dying on me. And it is a damn bummer, because as much as I love this console, I can already tell that it's not reliable. But I will say that there is a faint light at the end of this tunnel. It is possible to refurbish these beasts, with new thermal paste replacing broken parts with working parts, or reballing the motherboard. But even then, these are just said to be a stopgap to what it's pretty much leading to an ultimate demise. And yeah, the A01's already giving me issues, and it sucks. Now, I'm not saying that the E01's gonna last much longer. For all I know, it could die tomorrow, but from what it seems like right now, it is definitely bleeding out a lot slower than the full hardware one. So yeah, the winner here is easily partial emulation. And now, we've finally made it to the sole reason that any person would even want one of these systems: the video quality. I mean, come on. If you just wanted to play PS2 games, you could just get yourself a PS2. I mean, this is the best-selling console of all time. These are not hard to find. These are not rare, period. I mean, shit, I have so many. I have like 6 of them. I'm pretty sure I have 6 of them. No joke. But yeah, regardless of that, the main reason anybody wants a backwards compatible PS3 nowadays is that sweet 1080p HDMI output. Well, sort of. Every PS3 supports video outputs from 480p to 1080p, but the PS2's native output was 480i, with a small library of games that could actually make the push to 480p. So what does this mean? Well, it means that every 480i game will be deinterlaced to 480p, which gives games a much sharper look and mostly eliminates the flicker effect and combing effect present in 480i games. Now, while this isn't perfect, the PS3 does an incredible job of cleaning up PS2 games for an HD display, and even comes with a smoothing filter that makes games look smoother without softening the overall image. And yeah, that's it. And some of you may be thinking, that's it? I mean, yeah, unless you want to deal with upscalers, RGB, HDMI mods on a PS2, or PC emulation, or just gaming on a good old-fashioned CRT, which, I mean, I can't fault you there, I freaking love old CRTs, I might have like 2 of them. Backwards compatible PS3s is the only real official and borderline easiest, and in some cases cheapest way to get great video quality out of a PS2 game on an HD TV. Yeah, I told you it was niche, but in reality, it's really not. Great CRTs are hard to come by nowadays, and are really big bastards to say the least. A lot of HDTVs no longer come with component hookups, and cheap upscalers, well, are just that. Cheap and really unimpressive. So yeah, the Phat PS3 is revered as a crowning jewel because of how it outputs one of the biggest, and let's be honest, best libraries in gaming history. But oh yeah, right, this is a comparison video. So yeah, both Phat PS3s should display the same, video quality, right? Actually, no. I mean, I guess it's debatable which you prefer, but there is a clear objective difference between the two video outputs. And personally, if you're using a PS3 to play PS2 games, it only makes sense that you would want to get the best quality possible. So yeah, let's look at these differences side by side. Whether the smoothing function is on or off, in each case, it appears that the partial emulation appears to be a bit sharper, albeit with a bit wider aspect ratio. Now, I'm not really sure which is the more accurate rendition, but yeah, the sharpness is really shining through here, especially in very hectic moments. I'm honestly shocked here because I don't know whether it's because the E01 maybe is using emulation or maybe has a better video chip, but both PS3 pretty much display PS3 games in the exact same, they pretty much look virtually the same when they're playing PS3 games. But when they're starting to downres to PS2, I have to give it to the partial emulation. Again, mind you, this is nothing like the magic of PC emulators, which clean up the image to perfect smooth polygons. But as far as original hardware goes, I am pretty sure this is the best a PS2 game is going to look on an HD TV. So yeah, the point goes to the E01, which makes the overall winner the partial emulation option. Well, that's the video. And yeah, a lot of you hate me right now. I can feel it. But this video, I mean, usually with these versus videos, I'm not trying to, make an actual choice. I'm just, doing this for fun, just trying to compare two games or two consoles, trying to say like, oh, this is, got a little more of an edge, but they're still both great. The main issue with this, though, is nowadays, at least in this case, I really do believe that the E01 is the better option. I mean, not just for video quality. I mean, the video quality is amazing. That's the main reason I love it. But crap, delving deeper, I mean, the reliability issue and just the fact that, I mean, look, the A01, this is somewhat more of a lament, the A01 is a phenomenal system, and this is easily the winner back then. Nowadays, with these things dying nowadays and just being much more rare to find, it's so hard to just want to just talk so much love about this thing, but again, it gave me problems. It's already on its way out, it's dying, and it pisses me off. But at the same time, it's like, even with, the 100%, backwards compatibility, that's also become obsolete. I mean, if you want to play Ratchet & Clank 1, 2, and 3, do not play them on the E01, they will run like crap. Or Metal Gear Solid 3, the cutscenes will look like shit. Instead, play all the remasters, all the re-releases. That's the main issue. In today's day and age, if you want to play PS2 games, you don't really need a PS2. All you need is just either access to a freaking store or a digital store, because most of the time, at least the heavy hitters of the PS2 have been either re-released or have their very own HD remasters, which have essentially become the best way to play those games nowadays. So yeah, back then, A01 would have won, bar none. But in today's world, at least with, the community really embracing PS2 games, also developers giving us those games in full and also giving us, compilations of those, the E01 wins. At least in today's day and age, it has much more strengths compared to the weaknesses of the A01. And also, don't let that be disparaging, by the way. If for some odd reason you are one of the lucky few out there who actually has an A01, not just like me, but I mean like a working one, 100%, thing is going strong, there's no issues at all, take care of it. Treat it like a freaking baby, because this thing deserves your time and care, because not only is it a crowning jewel, not only is it a relic of a freaking bygone era, but it's also a freaking champion for something that everybody wants nowadays. Backwards compatibility. This thing is amazing. Not because it's a technical marvel in 2006, holy crap, an $800 system being sold at $600, that's impressive, yes. But For people who love to play their games all on one system and not just, download them and actually use their discs, this thing is a perfect example of how that works so well. Just without the reliability issues. I mean, shit. This is why people want the PS5 to play every game before. That would be amazing. And this is a good showcase of why that's such a good idea, but I get it. It's harder to do. It could be very expensive. It's all these things just culminate. But this is a good example of how that worked. And shit, if the PS5 was announced at like $800, I'd definitely wait. But if the same situation happened and they said, "Oh yeah, we're taking out backwards compatibility," if they gave us 1, 2, and 3 with the newer models, I'm going straight to that old model, because backwards compatibility is a great, and I mean great, option for video games in general. But yeah, having said all that, the E01 still wins. In today's day and age, it is a great, and I mean great, option. But yeah, that's the video. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys later.